The Blue Lagoon wasn't made like a romance. It was built like a postcard, hiding a bruise. Two kids on a perfect island. No adults, no rules. A sun-drenched dream daring you to call it love. But behind the blush lighting, it was paradise filmed so gently it made people argue about what it meant. A story born scandalous expanded into a trilogy Hollywood couldn't stop touching. A romance filmed under restrictions so tight they became the argument themselves. And a film that refused to stay buried, resurfacing again and again, louder and more divided each time. These are 10 weird facts about the Blue Lagoon where innocence fractured, lines blurred, and the debate never faded. Lock in. This is where paradise turns poisonous. Number 1. The Blue Lagoon didn't start as a movie scandal. It started as Inc. 1908. Henry Daveres Stackpole writes a story that looks almost harmless at first glance. Two young cousins stranded on a deserted island. No adults, no laws, no language for what they're becoming. Just sun, hunger, shelter, and that slow, unnerving question hanging in the heat. What happens to innocence when civilization disappears? And nobody's there to tell you what anything means. And Stackpole didn't treat it like a one-time shock. The book hit hard enough to keep growing. He expanded it into a trilogy, pushing beyond the first castaways with the Garden of God in 1923 and the Gates of Morning in 1925, shifting toward descendants and wider South Seas worlds where paradise doesn't stay pure once outsiders arrive. The story turns bigger, stranger, more psychological, less romance, more consequence. Hollywood circled it long before 1982. A silent adaptation arrived in 1923. Then a British version in 1949 that deliberately softened the edges for its era and still became a major success in the UK. So when Randall Kleiser's 1980 film landed, it wasn't a remake. It was the third attempt to resurrect the same source, only now the culture was watching with a sharper knife. The film took liberties, reshaping dialogue and moments to survive modern scrutiny, especially around intimacy, where what the book could state plainly the movie had to imply, dodge, and control. People argued about the film like it appeared out of nowhere. But the DNA was always older, darker, and more literary than its reputation. People argued about the film like it appeared out of nowhere. But the scandal was always in the source. Hollywood didn't corrupt the story. It just finally put it where everyone could see it. Number 2. The Blue Lagoon didn't find its leads by chasing the best young stars. It found them the way a storm finds survivors, by counting who left and who stayed. The search for Richard dragged on more than a year and swallowed thousands of auditions. And after all that, the film landed on Christopher Atkins, a guy with zero acting experience. He was a model and a sailing instructor, not a trained performer. And that was the point. The filmmakers didn't want polish. They wanted someone who looked like he hadn't been taught how to act civilized yet. Even his appearance came with a condition. Perm the hair, roughen the edges, make him look sunstruck and untamed. Less teen idol, more island creature learning words from scratch. Emmeline's path was just as loaded. Jennifer Jason Leigh was reportedly the studio's first choice, and it wasn't some dramatic refusal on her end. The Wall was simpler and colder. Her father wouldn't give permission, so the role moved on. And then Brooke Shields stepped into it, not as a rescue, but as a decision that would end up swallowing the conversation around the entire movie for decades. Even the almost casting reads like a trail of warning signs. Willie Alms was offered Richard and turned it down because of the nudity. Diane Lane walked away too after privately discussing what the script demanded. Then fate doubled back. Alms later starred in Paradise in 1982, a film endlessly compared to the Blue Lagoon and even more willing to lean into the very heat he refused here. So no, this wasn't a lineup built by confidence. It was built by attrition. The Blue Lagoon didn't cast who Hollywood wanted most. It cast the people still standing when the room went quiet. Number 3. If the Blue Lagoon feels genuinely remote, that's because the production really did go far from comfort. Randall Kleiser chose Nuku'alofa Levu in Fiji and stayed there for months, aiming for an island that didn't look built. At the time, it wasn't a place you could treat like a normal set. Limited infrastructure, basic living setups, a crew operating with fewer comforts than a studio backlit could ever fake. A ship anchored offshore helped hold equipment and supplies because there wasn't a clean, easy way to run production the usual way. And once you're out there, reality sets the rhythm. Weather shifts, gear breaks, Long days feel longer when you can't just step into a trailer and reset your body. People got sick. Everyone was tired. The isolation wasn't dramatic every minute, but it wore on you in small, steady ways. Brooke Shields did fall ill during the shoot, and during the birth scene she started coughing and struggling for breath. In the moment, it could look like intense performance, but it was also a reminder that the conditions were real and the line between acting and enduring the day could get thin out there. So some of what you feel on screen isn't performance, it's survival. The movie didn't just look remote, it was remote, and the audience never knew the difference. Number 4, The Blue Lagoon only works if you believe the bond. Randall Kleiser knew that meant the chemistry couldn't feel acted. So, he didn't just direct scenes. He tried to direct the air between his two young leads when the cameras weren't rolling. He pushed Brooke Shields and Christopher Atkins together offset, steering them into shared time and quiet proximity, like he was rehearsing trust the same way you rehearse blocking. Atkins later claimed Kleiser even put a photo of Shields above his bed, hoping a real crush might seep into the frame before the script demanded intimacy. For a while it did. Living on a remote island cut off from normal life, the connection reportedly turned into a brief, innocent romance. Atkins described it as romantic, innocent, and very nice. The kind of soft island attachment that feels bigger when the world shrinks down to beaches, heat, and the same faces every day. But the same isolation that can spark closeness can also grind it down. As the shoot dragged on, their bond soured into constant friction. Atkins wanted focus, staying locked into the emotional tone. Shields, younger and more playful, needed laughter and breathing room between takes. He later said she thought he took acting too seriously. He felt she couldn't stay dialed in. And here's the part that sticks. Kleiser didn't shut that tension down. He used it. He kept filming the emotional strain while it was still raw, letting real irritation and distance leak straight into the performances. Kleiser didn't build chemistry. He manufactured it, filmed it falling apart, and sold it as romance. The innocence on screen was real. The director just made sure it wouldn't last. Number 5. Most movies use the camera to reveal. The Blue Lagoon used the camera to calculate. Brooke Shields was 14, so every moment became a tightrope. Distance, angle, hair placement, timing. One wrong frame, and the movie stops being a romance and turns into a headline. So the body the audience thinks it saw often was not Brooke at all. Many wide shots used an adult double, Kathy Trout, a dolphin trainer already working on the production who matched Shields' build. For anything closer, the rules snapped tighter. Shields stayed covered, and her hair was literally secured to keep the frame safe. Even the explicit moments avoided her face, like the film was trying to sell an illusion while leaving no proof behind. Christopher Atkins lived on the other side of that bargain. He was 18, and he did most of his nude scenes himself. He later described it as awkward, not glamorous, standing exposed in early morning prep while makeup was applied like it was just another job. But once the movie became famous, that visibility followed him. The roles that came next didn't always see actor. They saw the nude guy from the Blue Lagoon. And that's why the controversy never fades. You can feel the crew wrestling the frame shot by shot, like the film is always one gust of wind away from losing control. Number 6. Once you realize how carefully the movie tried to control what you actually saw, the backlash makes a brutal kind of sense. When the Blue Lagoon hit theaters in 1980, the argument didn't stay in reviews. It spilled into parent groups, watchdog campaigns, and public outrage that treated the film like a line in the sand. The numbers were impossible to ignore, a story built on teenage intimacy played by a girl who was 14 opposite a co-star who was 18. The studio had its defense ready because it was baked into the shoot itself. Shields didn't do nude scenes. Adult doubles handled wide shots. Blocking and coverage were designed to keep her protected. But that didn't end the debate. It sharpened it. Because now the question wasn't only what did the audience see, it became how far will a movie go to suggest something while insisting it was controlled. The uproar got so intense that it moved beyond culture and into official scrutiny. Shields later repeated the same core point again and again. She didn't perform nude scenes, and the explicit imagery people argued about wasn't her. But by then the film had already turned into a national argument with a box office heartbeat. People protested, people condemned it, and still people bought tickets. Number 7. That cannibal dance is one of the movie's most unnerving moments because it doesn't feel performed, it feels observed, And that's the secret. The production didn't build the ritual from imagination. They brought in local Fijians, and the music, movement, and rhythm came from real tradition, not a Hollywood choreographer trying to invent menace. They even went further. Tattoo designs were researched. A tribal chief shaped the dance. The chant wasn't random syllables for mood. It was an actual chant. And when you translate it, it lands almost like a trapdoor. Our enemies are floating ducks. That's what makes the scene stick. On screen, it plays like danger. Behind the scenes, it was culture forced to wear a horror mask. Number 8, on paper, the Blue Lagoon should have died at the shoreline. Critics hit it like a storm, tearing into the film with the kind of disgust that doesn't fade quietly. The backlash didn't just stick to the movie. It followed Brooke Shields straight into the first wave of Razzies, branding her with Worst Actress while she was still just a teenager being turned into a headline. But Universal had one weapon the reviews couldn't touch. The movie was beautiful. Not pretty for what it is, beautiful, lush, glowing, hypnotic. The island looked like a postcard that shouldn't exist, and the cinematography was strong enough to earn an Academy Award nomination. Like the film itself was being scolded with one hand and rewarded with the other. Then the part that made the whole situation feel unreal. People bought tickets not out of politeness, out of fascination, out of escape, out of whatever strange pull that premise had in 1980. The numbers climbed until the film became one of the year's biggest hits. And somehow, in the same breath that Shields was being mocked, Christopher Atkins was being treated like a breakout, landing a major new star nomination. So the movie landed in a place most films never reach, attacked, argued over, awarded for its beauty, and kept alive by audiences who didn't care what the critics wanted it to be. It wasn't praised. It wasn't respected. It was watched anyway. And that's the kind of success that leaves a scar. Number 9, in the US, the Blue Lagoon arrived with a cloud already forming over it. Reviews were rough. The conversation was loud, moral, and messy. But something strange happened once the movie left American theaters and drifted overseas. In places like Romania, Hungary, and Brazil, it didn't land as a scandal first. It landed as a dream. A tropical world, 2 kids, a story that felt like forbidden romance wrapped in sunlight. And then TV did what theaters couldn't. It replayed it again and again. Late-night reruns, weekend broadcasts. That same blue water showing up like a memory you didn't ask for but couldn't stop watching. Over time, the film stopped being the controversy. It became a time capsule, a soft, hazy piece of 1980s escape, remembered for its beaches and its mood more than the arguments around it. In America, the movie was a scandal that wouldn't die. Overseas, it was just summer on repeat. Time didn't erase the controversy. Distance did. And somewhere between the two, the Blue Lagoon stopped being a problem and became a postcard. Number 10, after 1980, the Blue Lagoon stopped being just a movie. It became a problem Hollywood couldn't stop touching. The title turned into a magnet. Controversy on one side, box office on the other. And once a story proves it can shock people and still sell tickets, studios don't walk away, they circle. So the premise rose again in 1991 with Return to the Blue Lagoon. Not a clean continuation, more like a reset button pushed with nervous hands. A new pair of castaways, a familiar island, the same paradise that never stays gentle for long. It was softer, safer in some ways, but it still chased the same spell the original cast. Youth, isolation, and the unsettling idea that nature doesn't care how old you are. Then 2012 brought the next mutation. Blue Lagoon. The awakening dragged the concept into the modern world where innocence isn't protected by distance anymore, and growing up comes with different pressure. And in a strange full-circle moment, Christopher Atkins reappeared in a new role, like the story itself couldn't resist leaving a fingerprint from the 1980 version on the reboot. Different decades, different tones, different stars, but the same premise keeps winning. Studios don't remake the Blue Lagoon because it's romantic. They remake it because the formula works, a movie that sparked protests and still topped the box office. Bonus fact, that remote, untouched island wasn't a studio illusion. The primary filming location in Fiji was real, and after the cameras left, it didn't vanish into trivia. It transformed. The place later became Turtle Island, a luxury resort that sells the exact opposite of what the production lived through. The beaches are private. The experience is curated. The guest list is controlled with a strict limit on how many couples can be there at once. The same sand that once meant heat, sickness, exhaustion, and isolation became a product called escape. Years later, director Randall Kleiser and Christopher Atkins returned and walked those same stretches of shoreline again. Not as cast and crew fighting survival conditions, but as people revisiting the set of something that permanently changed their lives. The movie didn't just leave a mark on cinema. It changed the destiny of the place itself. What was once a story about being stranded became a destination for people who pay to disappear. The Blue Lagoon didn't last because it was beloved. It lasted because it was impossible to look at cleanly. Sunlight on water, perfect beaches, a dreamlike world built on isolation. But beneath it all, there was tension, discomfort, a camera always negotiating with a line it could never fully cross. That's why the film never settles into classic. It keeps getting reopened, rejudged, re-argued. So if this one still lingers in your mind, drop a comment. Tell us what part stayed with you and what unsettling classic we should examine next. A story about being cut off from the world that somehow followed everyone back home.